In the small town of Marrow Creek, legend had it that the woods were haunted by the ghost of a girl who, betrayed by her closest friend, wandered the shadows, her whispers as chilling as the wind that swept through the trees. Despite the eerie tales, for Lila and Emma, two best friends since childhood, the woods were a place of adventure, a place to escape the mundanities of their everyday lives. On a crisp autumn evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the town, Lila and Emma decided to camp out in those very woods. It was meant to be a night of laughter and storytelling, a celebration of their years of friendship before college would inevitably pull them apart. "Are you sure about this?" Emma asked as they set up their tent beneath the ancient oaks, their gnarled branches intertwining like the fingers of a witch. Lila laughed, her voice echoing slightly in the growing darkness. "Come on, Em, don't tell me you believe in those old ghost stories." "It's not the stories that bother me," Emma replied, hammering a tent peg into the ground. "It's just it feels weird, being out here, knowing everything's about to change." As night enveloped them, they sat by the campfire, the crackling flames casting eerie dancing shadows. They talked about their future, their fears, and the deep-seated hope that their friendship would survive the distances. As the hours waned, a thick fog began to roll in, enveloping the woods in a ghostly veil. The fire had dwindled to glowing embers, and the chill of the night crept up on them. "Let's tell ghost stories," Lila suggested, a mischievous twinkle in her eyes. Emma hesitated but then nodded, pulling her blanket tighter around her. Lila began with a story about a haunted mansion, her voice low and dramatic. Emma listened, her eyes wide, the flickering light of their dying fire casting strange shadows on her face. When it was Emma's turn, she leaned in close, lowering her voice to a whisper. "They say the girl in the woods was betrayed by her best friend. She trusted her with a secret, a dark secret that was supposed to stay between them. But her friend told everyone, and the next day, the girl was found, her body cold, her spirit gone, but not at peace." Lila shivered, glancing around the shadowy woods. "That's creepy, Em. Let's not make this night about betrayals, okay?" They laughed nervously, trying to shake off the unease that had settled over them. As the night deepened, strange sounds began to punctuate the silence, twig snapping, whispers that seemed to float through the trees, and an inexplicable feeling of being watched. "Did you hear that?" Emma whispered, her voice tense as she looked toward the dark recesses of the forest. "It's probably just an animal," Lila said, but her voice lacked conviction. The whispering grew louder, more insistent. It seemed to come from all around them, words indistinguishable but filled with an urgent malevolence. Emma grabbed Lila's arm, her eyes wide with fear. "Lila, we need to leave. Now." Before they could pack up, a figure emerged from the fog, its form blurred but unmistakably human. The girls froze, their breaths shallow, as the figure stepped closer, revealing the pale, anguished face of a young girl, her eyes hollow with sorrow and anger. "You betrayed me," the ghostly figure whispered, her voice a chilling echo of despair. The ground beneath them seemed to tremble with the weight of her words. Emma and Lila backed away slowly, the realization dawning on them that the story of betrayal might not have been just a story. As they stumbled through the underbrush, trying to escape the accusing gaze of the ghost, the narrative of their own friendship began to unravel, secrets long buried coming to light in the worst possible way. The woods seemed to close in around them, the fog thickening, the whispering intensifying until it was all they could hear. As Lila and Emma rushed through the dense undergrowth, the whispering intensified, now clear and terrifyingly personal. "You should have kept the secret," the voice hissed, each word a sharp stab of betrayal from beyond the grave. Their hearts pounded in their chests as they navigated the foggy labyrinth of trees. Branches grabbed at their clothes like the cold fingers of the dead, pulling them back, slowing their escape. The moon, barely visible through the thick canopy, offered little light, its pale glow swallowed by the encroaching mist. Suddenly, Emma tripped over a root, her body thudding against the damp earth. "Lila, help!" she cried out, panic-stricken as she felt a cold hand brush against her ankle. Lila, heart racing, turned back, reaching for Emma's hand, pulling with all her might against the unseen force that seemed to want to drag Emma away. "They never forgive," the voice whispered, so close now that both girls could feel the chill of its breath. Lila yanked harder, and with a desperate effort, they broke free, continuing their frantic dash through the woods. As they ran, the history of their friendship flashed before them, years of shared secrets, laughter, and tears. But nestled within those memories were darker moments, small betrayals, and lies that had seemed inconsequential at the time. Each memory now seemed to fuel the spectral pursuit, as if the ghost fed on their guilt. "Emma, what did we do?" Lila gasped between breaths, her voice shaky. "Why is she after us?" "I don't know." Emma's voice cracked under the strain. "It's just a story, Lila. It's just a story we made up." But the woods seemed to disagree. The trees whispered accusations, and the wind moaned with the sorrow of the betrayed. Every shadow seemed to shift, hiding secrets and threats. After what felt like hours, the girls emerged into a clearing, the moonlight stark against the dark trees surrounding them. In the center of the clearing stood an old well, its stones covered in moss and vines. The air around it was colder, the whispering louder, more insistent. "This is it," the voice whispered, no longer just in their ears but echoing through the trees. "The place where secrets come to die." Hesitant, the girls approached the well, the ground beneath their feet crunching with dead leaves. As they peered into the darkness below, a cold wind surged up, carrying with it a foul stench of decay. "Look at what you made me do," the voice sobbed, its sorrow turning into rage. Shadows within the well seemed to swirl, forming the faint outline of a face, tortured and twisted in pain. Lila's and Emma's eyes widened in horror as they slowly backed away from the well. "We didn't do this," Emma shouted into the night, her voice trembling. "We didn't mean for any of this to happen." But the whispering continued, relentless. "Lies," it accused, each syllable dripping with malice. "The truth is in the well. The truth will set you free." Terrified, they turned to run, but the ground shook violently, knocking them off their feet. A deep rumbling came from the depths of the earth, as if something long buried was about to emerge. Lila scrambled to her feet, helping Emma up. "We can't stay here," she said, her voice urgent. "We need to find a way out." But the forest had other plans. The trees around the clearing seemed to bend inward, narrowing their path of escape. The fog thickened, enveloping them in a blind white haze. Their flashlight beams faltered, the darkness devouring the light. As they groped their way forward, the air grew colder, the whispers louder. "Come back," the voice called, a perverse invitation laced with venom. "Come back and end this." Heartbeats pounding in their ears, the girls pressed on, the weight of their past and the terror of their present moment merging into a relentless nightmare. Every rustle of the leaves felt like a warning, every snap of a twig a threat. And through it all, the story of the girl in the woods wove itself around them, a tale of trust broken and vengeance sought from beyond the grave. As they moved deeper into the darkness, the line between reality and horror blurred, leaving them to wonder if they would ever escape or if the woods would claim them as its next tragic tale. In their frenzied escape through the thickening mist, Lila and Emma stumbled upon an old, dilapidated cabin, its wooden planks groaning under the weight of time. The door, barely hanging on its hinges, creaked ominously as the wind pushed against it. With no other refuge in sight and the whispers closing in, they had no choice but to enter. Inside, the cabin was shrouded in darkness, the only light coming from the cracks in the wooden walls, casting thin, ghostly beams across the dusty floor. The air was thick with the smell of mold and decay, and as their eyes adjusted, the shapes of old furniture emerged from the shadows, a broken table, a few chairs, and a fireplace filled with long cold ashes. "Maybe we can hide here until dawn," Emma suggested, her voice a mere whisper, as if afraid to disturb the silence that seemed to press down on them. Lila nodded, her eyes scanning the dark corners of the room. "Yeah, let's try to block the door. Help me with this table." They moved the table against the door, the effort leaving them breathless but feeling momentarily safer. They huddled together in the center of the room, listening to the haunting sounds of the forest. The whispering seemed to have followed them, seeping through the cracks with the cold night air. As they sat in silence, the history of the cabin began to reveal itself through layers of dust and decay. Old photographs hung crooked on the walls, their faces faded but eyes seemingly following their every move. A journal lay on the floor, its cover worn, the pages yellowed with age. Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, Emma reached for the journal, her fingers trembling as she opened it. Their handwriting was elegant but frantic, the words bleeding into each other with urgency. It was a diary, and the entry spoke of loss and betrayal, of friends turned foes, and a curse that bound the writer to this very cabin. "The woods do not forget," read one entry, the ink smudged by tears or perhaps rain. "And neither does the ghost of my best friend, whom I betrayed for love that was never mine to claim." Chills ran down their spines as the reality of their situation sank in deeper. The ghostly whispers weren't just hunting them, they were repeating a cycle of betrayal and vengeance that had begun long before they were born. Suddenly, a loud thud against the door made them jump. The table shifted slightly, the old wood creaking under the pressure. Another thud, and then another, each one louder, more desperate. "It's her," Emma gasped, her face pale in the moonlight that filtered through the windows. "She's found us." Lila grabbed the journal, flipping through the pages, looking for anything that might help them. "There has to be a way to break the cycle," she said, her voice cracking with panic. "There has to be something here." The entries blurred past, whispers of past lives, of love and betrayal, of a charm made to ward off evil spirits, but the charm was lost, its whereabouts a mystery left unsolved by the journal's author. "We need to find that charm," Lila decided, her resolve hardening. "It's the only way to stop her." "How?" "We don't even know where to start looking," Emma replied, despair edging her voice as another loud bang shut the door. "We start with her story," Lila said, pointing to the journal. "We find out everything about her, about the betrayal. We find where it all went wrong." With the ghost's rage beating against the door like a storm, Lila and Emma scoured the journal for clues, piecing together a tale of friendship, jealousy, and a cursed love that led to a tragic end in these very woods. As they read, the cabin seemed to come alive with the echoes of the past, the walls whispering secrets long kept, the shadows playing out scenes of a friendship that spiraled into darkness. The girls could feel the eyes in the photographs watching them, as if urging them to uncover the truth, to free not just themselves but the souls bound to this haunted place. Outside, the forest held its breath, the wind dying down as if listening to the unfolding story within the cabin. The banging on the door slowed, then stopped, the silence sudden and heavy. Lila and Emma looked at each other, their fear mingled with determination. They knew what they had to do. The night was far from over, and the woods were watching, waiting for the curse to be broken or to claim its next victims. The whispering began again, softer now, more mournful than menacing. It seemed to plead with them, guiding them deeper into the heart of the mystery, into the depths of the forest where the truth waited, hidden in the shadows, just out of reach. As dawn approached, the true horror awaited them was yet to be uncovered. Armed with the journal and a flickering flashlight, Lila and Emma ventured back into the night. The air was still, unnaturally so, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Fog clung to the ground, making their path unclear, but they pressed forward, driven by a desperate need to end the nightmare. The woods seemed endless, the trees towering and imposing, casting long, twisted shadows that danced in the dim light of their flashlight. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig underfoot heightened their tension, their senses alert to any movement. The whispers had quieted, but the silence was even more unsettling, a suffocating blanket of anticipation and dread. They reached a part of the woods that felt eerily familiar, though they couldn't say why. The ground sloped downward, leading to a small, secluded valley shrouded in darkness. According to the journal, this was where the betrayal had taken place, where a friendship had been shattered by jealousy and a forbidden love. There, Emma pointed to a gnarled old tree that stood alone, its limbs twisted in agony. That's where she said the charm was hidden, under the tree where it all ended. With trembling hands, they began to dig at the base of the tree, the earth cold and damp beneath their fingers. The darkness around them seemed to close in, pressing against their backs with an almost physical force. They dug deeper, driven by fear and an urgent hope that this charm, this small piece of history, could save them. Suddenly, Lila's hand brushed against something hard. She gasped, pulling it out from the soil. It was a small, intricately carved wooden box, covered in ancient runes that glowed faintly in the moonlight. They stared at it, a mix of relief and awe washing over them. This was it, the charm that could break the cycle. But as they opened the box, a cold wind rushed out, so powerful it nearly knocked them to the ground. The forest erupted into chaos, the trees swaying violently, their branches scratching the sky. The whispers returned, louder, more frantic, a chorus of voices that filled the night with their sorrow and rage. They lied, the voices hissed. The charm won't save you. It's too late. It's always been too late. The air around them thickened, the fog turning into a whirlwind that obscured their vision. Figures appeared in the mist, ethereal and distorted, their faces twisted in pain. They reached out to Lila and Emma, their hands passing through them, cold as the grave. "We're sorry," Emma cried out, her voice lost in the howling wind. "We didn't know." But the spirits were relentless, their anger a palpable force that threatened to overwhelm them. Lila clutched the charm, reciting words from the journal that were meant to calm the spirits, to send them to rest. But the words felt empty, powerless against the fury of the betrayed. As dawn began to break, the wind died down, and the figures dissipated, melting back into the fog. The girls were left alone, the charm still in Lila's hand, its runes no longer glowing. "We need to find another way," Lila said, her voice steady despite the terror they had faced. "This isn't over." They knew they couldn't leave, not yet. The curse was still a part of the woods, a part of the town's history that couldn't be ignored. They had to find the original betrayer, the one whose actions had set everything in motion. Only by confronting the past, by uncovering all its dark secrets, could they hope to free themselves and the spirits trapped in eternal torment. With the first light of dawn casting long shadows over the land, Lila and Emma walked back to the cabin, their resolve hardened. The journal had more to tell, and they needed to understand everything. The woods watched them go, silent now, but the sense of foreboding lingered, a reminder that some truths were buried deep, tangled in roots and shrouded in shadows, waiting for the brave, or the foolish, to unearth them. The story of betrayal and redemption was far from over. As they retraced their steps, the echoes of the past whispered around them, a tapestry of sorrow and hope intertwined, leading them deeper into the heart of Marrow Creek's darkest tale. Their return to the cabin felt different this time. The once merely unsettling shadows now seemed charged with an ominous energy, as if the cabin itself had absorbed the terror and history of the woods. Each step towards it seemed to draw more from their dwindling reserves of courage. As they entered, the door creaked louder than before, almost as if protesting their presence. Inside, the dim morning light did little to dispel the gloom that filled the cabin. The photographs on the walls, faces blurred and indistinct, seemed to watch them with a new intensity, their eyes following every movement. Lila set the charm on the old wooden table, the thud echoing unnaturally in the still air. They returned to the journal, flipping through its pages with a renewed sense of urgency. The diary entries became increasingly disjointed, the handwriting more erratic as the author delved deeper into madness driven by guilt and fear. "See the signs, follow the path," one entry read, the words scrawled so violently that the pen had torn through the paper. It seemed that the author had begun to see visions, possibly driven by the same spirits that now haunted Lila and Emma. They decided to map out the places mentioned in the journal, each location a piece of the puzzle in the tragedy of the woods. The first was the well where they first felt the intense surge of the supernatural, the second was the gnarled tree under which they found the charm, and now they added a new location, an old church abandoned and nearly reclaimed by the forest on the outskirts of Marrow Creek. As they prepared to leave for the church, the air grew inexplicably colder, and the faint sound of a child's laughter echoed through the cabin, sending shivers down their spines. It was a sound completely out of place, yet unmistakably real. They trekked toward the church, the path overgrown, nature slowly erasing the traces of human presence. The building itself loomed like a spectre, its steeple jagged against the sky, windows shattered, leaving dark, empty eyes staring out into the woods. Inside, the church was a shell of its former self, pews overturned, the altar stripped bare. The air was thick with the dust of decay, and a single, unbroken stained glass window depicted a scene of an angel weeping, the colors vibrant against the backdrop of desolation. Here, the whispers were different, tinged with sadness rather than malice. "Forgive us," they seemed to say, a sorrowful mantra that resonated with the stained glass image. Emma walked down the aisle, her flashlight beam catching on something half buried under a pile of debris. It was a small wooden box, much like the one containing the charm, but older, its surface etched with symbols of protection and penance. Inside, wrapped in a rotting cloth, was a locket containing a faded photograph of two children, one of them unmistakably the girl from the legends, her gaze haunted even then. "This was hers," Lila whispered, holding the locket carefully. "We're on the right track." They left the church as the sun began to set, the light fading rapidly, shadows creeping across the ground to meet them. The forest seemed alive with whispers, the voices clearer now, less threatening. "Help us," they said. "End the curse." Their journey led them deeper into the heart of the woods, to a clearing where the trees circled a dark, still pond. The surface mirrored the twilight sky, but beneath it lay a darkness that seemed to swallow light. "This is it," Emma said, her voice a mix of fear and determination. "This is where it ends." They stood at the edge of the pond, the locket in hand, the whispers around them now pleading, urgent. They knew what they had to do. The charm had not been enough, it needed to be reunited with its owner, with her memory, her pain. Lila opened the locket, placing it gently into the water. The surface rippled, then began to glow with a soft, otherworldly light. The whispers crescendoed around them, a cacophony of voices that filled the night. The water churned, and from it rose a figure, the girl from the legend, her expression one of profound sorrow and longing. She reached out, her hand almost touching the locket, her eyes meeting theirs. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice echoing across the clearing. Then, with a final, peaceful glance, she faded away, the light dissipating, leaving the night silent but for the sound of the wind through the trees. But as Lila and Emma turned to leave, a cold wind whipped through the clearing, carrying with it a new whisper, one that chilled them to their bones. "It's not over," the voice hissed, filled with a new threat, a new malice. "It's never over." As they hurried back to the safety of the cabin, the realization that their ordeal was far from over weighed heavily on them. The ghostly girl's peaceful departure had been but a momentary respite, a brief clearing of the storm clouds before the tempest renewed its fury. The forest around them seemed to pulse with an unseen energy, the trees whispering not of solace but of impending doom. The night grew darker, the path less discernible underfoot, as if the very earth itself conspired to trap them in this nightmare. As they reached the cabin, the door swung open with an eerie creak, despite no wind to drive it. Inside, the shadows seemed deeper, more menacing than before. The air was thick with the scent of decay, a stark reminder of the cabin's long, troubled history. They hesitated on the threshold, the oppressive atmosphere beckoning them into the darkness. "We can't stay here," Emma whispered, her voice trembling. "It feels like it's waiting for us." But Lila, with a determined look, stepped forward. "We can't run forever. Whatever is happening, we need to face it here, now." They entered, the door slamming shut behind them with a thunderous bang that echoed through the empty rooms. The cabin felt alive, the walls seeming to breathe around them, the photographs on the walls flickering in and out of focus as if alive. The journal lay open on the table, its pages fluttering as though caught in a breeze, yet the air was deathly still. Words seemed to form on the pages, a message being written by an unseen hand: "Return what was taken. Return what was taken." Emma echoed, confusion and fear evident in her voice. "What does it mean? What else is there?" Lila approached the table, her hands hovering over the journal. The locket was part of it, but maybe it wasn't enough. "There's something else, something we're missing." They scoured the cabin, searching for any clue, any object that might fit the cryptic message. Their search led them to a loose floorboard under the rug, which creaked ominously as they stepped over it. Pulling it up, they discovered a small, hidden compartment beneath. Inside, wrapped in a faded cloth, was an old, dust-covered book, its cover embossed with symbols that matched those on the charm and the wooden box in the church. Its pages were filled with ancient rites and rituals, including one marked prominently as a binding spell. "The binding spell," Lila read aloud, the words sending a shiver down her spine. "It says here that it was used to bind a spirit to a physical object, to keep it from causing harm. But if the spirit isn't at rest, the binding can become a curse." "That's it then," Emma said, realization dawning on her face. The locket was part of the binding, but this book, this spell, it's what's holding her here, keeping the cycle going. "We need to break the spell," Lila said, her voice firm despite the flickering fear in her eyes. "We need to free her, truly free her." They set up in the center of the cabin, the book open between them. They recited the incantation, their voices growing more confident as they spoke the ancient words. The cabin shook, the wind howled, and the photographs on the walls shattered, their glass flying like shrapnel as the spirit's fury was unleashed. But then, as suddenly as it had begun, the chaos ceased. The air cleared, the oppressive energy dissipating like mist under the morning sun. They looked around, the cabin peaceful for the first time since they had entered. They exited the cabin, stepping into the dawn light, the woods now silent, the curse seemingly broken. But as they walked away, a cold breeze whispered through the trees, a voice soft but unmistakable in its warning. "Be wary, for some bindings are never truly broken." As they walked back towards the edge of the woods, each step took them further from the nightmare they had endured but carried with them a chilling reminder: in the shadows of Marrow Creek, the past was never truly at rest, and their story might just be one chapter in a much longer, darker tale. As Lila and Emma emerged from the dense thicket into the early morning light, the tranquility of dawn belied the horrors they had endured throughout the night. The gentle rays of the sun filtered through the leaves, casting a serene glow that contrasted sharply with the darkness that had consumed the woods only hours before. They paused at the edge of the forest, the boundary between the natural world and the supernatural horrors they had escaped. Both carried the weight of their experience in their silence, the realization that the woods might never be free of its haunted past etched deeply in their expressions. "Will it ever truly be over?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as if afraid that speaking too loudly might awaken the dormant spirits. Lila turned to her, a weary smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Maybe some stories don't have an ending, Em. Maybe we just learn to live with them, make peace with the ghosts of our past." They walked back to the town of Marrow Creek, the streets quiet in the early morning. As they passed the familiar landmarks, the diner, the post office, the little library corner, it all seemed untouched by the terrors of the woods. Life here moved on, oblivious to the darkness that lurked just beyond the trees. But as they reached the heart of the town, they noticed something different, a mural they had never seen before. It depicted a girl, her face somber yet peaceful, surrounded by a forest and a well. The townspeople, walking by, seemed to pay it no mind, but for Lila and Emma, it was a stark reminder of the night's events. "It's her," Emma said, stopping in her tracks. The girl in the mural had the same haunting eyes as the spirit they had encountered. "She's become a part of the town's story, a warning maybe, or a guardian. Or both," Lila added, studying the mural. "She's not forgotten. And maybe that's the way it should be." The sun climbed higher, casting its light over the mural, making it seem as if the girl was looking right at them, acknowledging their role in her story. They stood there for a moment, a silent communion between the living and the depicted spirit, a bridge across realms forged by their ordeal. 11111. As they finally walked away, the air shifted slightly, a cool breeze blowing through the streets, carrying a faint whisper that only they could hear, "Thank you." It was a whisper of release, of spirits finally at peace, or perhaps it was just the wind. Either way, it brought a sense of closure, a subtle confirmation that their actions had not been in vain. Lila and Emma would move on from Marrow Creek, their lives taking them down different paths, but the bond they shared, forged in the heart of a haunted night, would remain unbroken. And the story of the woods, while quieter now, would linger in their hearts, a haunting melody that would occasionally rise in the hush of twilight, reminding them of the night they faced the past, and won. Years later, Marrow Creek would continue to be a quaint town, its mysteries and legends passed down through generations, a reminder of the thin veil between our world and the unknown. The mural remained, untouched by time, a memorial to the girl and to all those who had been touched by the woods. And so, as new stories emerged and old legends faded, the true tale of Marrow Creek would endure, a hauntingly beautiful symphony of human courage, spectral sorrow, and the eternal quest for redemption in the shadows of the unknown.